All right. Well, good morning, everyone,
Good
and
morning.
welcome to Thursday morning Bible study with special thanks to Dee for covering last week. I was called downtown for at the last minute, not about me, about somebody else I was assisting. So don't worry, I'm not in trouble. But when downtown calls, I got bosses too, just like everybody else. So thank you, Dee, for doing that. And so we were just gonna, before we jumped into chapter 18, to see if anybody had questions about chapter 17. Um, so let's see, there you go. You should be able to see the screen now. Does anybody have any questions about chapter 17, which you finished last week?
Remember, we were talking about Jesus praying for us. That how we appreciate it, and thought. And Michael got the Holy Ghost. He was so touched by this. I just, wanted to know if anybody wanted to just to put a recap on it, how they felt about, that the idea that Jesus has gone to the Father just to pray, not only for his disciples, but he's also praying for us. And that is so, it just was so overwhelming. It was just too much. Anybody?
No, I just thought it was really, really touching and overwhelming. I mean, he prayed to the Father for himself, and then he said a long prayer for his disciples, who he touched, and then he prayed for us. And, I think many of us on the call last week was overwhelmed by those prayers.
I think for me, and I can't find the line, but it was almost like, we know God loves us, but it was the realization of the depth of God's love. And that's what was overwhelming to me.
Yes, ditto.
Yeah, and I don't know. It's like, we know God loves us, but all of a sudden the realization of the depth of that love and that kind of prayer that Jesus was praying to the Father, not just for his disciples, but I think the line was something like, those who believe and continue this evangelization type thing, which is us. Because it's come down to us, and we're the ones who are doing what the disciples did and spreading the word of God and the Holy Spirit and Jesus. And it was the depth of Jesus' sincerity and love for us that just overwhelmed me.
Right. And it wasn't just for those who believe now, it's those who will believe.
Yeah.
So as there is an opportunity for other people to be wrapped in his love as well. But it was powerful. It is powerful. I didn't say was, it is.
That was what was so overwhelming to me, and throughout the conversation it was just building up. I said I couldn't explain it, but after I got myself together and just let it marinate more, it was the love that we talked about, the sharing that everybody did, and the core thing again, with everything that's going on in this world, it was that we have to stand on the truth. And that just hit me, that the truth keeps prevailing in the midst of all these lies that's going on. So that whole kit and caboodle just came down on me at that one time. And I can't, the feeling was like an anxiety, but it was the spirit, that the words that came out of my mouth, I guess, was addressing all of that. And just to know that the prayer that Jesus prayed to the Father, that includes me, that includes us.
Right.
even today. So it just all came down on me all that one time. So now I've
And
explained it.
yeah. And I think too that accepting that truth of who he is, I believe that from what I got from this is that that's the only way we're going to have eternity.
Good. Well, it was sure is very moving passage. I mean, and I've had similar reactions myself when I have covered this passage and prayed with it. I remember praying with it for an entire retreat. The whole idea that Jesus has already prayed for us. I mean, 2,000 years ago, he was praying for us. So yes, it's a very powerful section. So why don't we move on as we begin to enter Holy Week with the Holy Week narrative. And that begins with it actually began back when we were doing the Last Supper, but it continues really now into his Passion with chapter 18. So would somebody like to start by reading chapter 18? Don't all jump at once.
I'll read it, Father. I couldn't get my mute off.
Okay.
All right. Jesus arrested. When he had said this, Jesus went out with his disciples across the Kidron Valley to where there was a garden, into which he and his disciples entered. Judas, his betrayer, also knew the place because Jesus had often met there with his disciples. So Judas got a band of soldiers and guards from the chief priests and the Pharisees and went there with lanterns, torches, and weapons. Jesus, knowing everything that was about to happen to him, went out and said to them, "Whom are you looking for?" They answered him, "Jesus the Nazarene." He said to them, "I am." Judas, his betrayer, was also with them. When he said to them, "I am," they turned away and fell to the ground. So he again asked them, "Whom are you looking for?" They said, "Jesus the Nazarene." Jesus answered, "I told you that I am. So if you're looking for me, let these men go." This was to fulfill what he had said, "I have not lost any of those you gave me." Then Simon Peter, who had a sword, drew it, struck the high priest's slave, and cut off his right ear. The slave's name was Malchus. Jesus said to Peter, "Put your sword into its scabbard. Shall I not drink the cup that the Father gave me?"
Okay.
So
Let's
stop
stop
there.
there.
Okay.
So we are in the Garden of Gethsemane. What are your first reactions?
Well, I'm going to jump in. My action is the I am part. So when he says I am, I'm wondering, we're seeing this in written form, and we see that I am is written capital, and we know what that means.
Mhm.
But as he's saying I am, do they get it? And then he said I am again, and then people fell to the ground. Is that because they recognized it, or something just took? I'm confused at that point. You know, wow, that happened.
Hold on to that. We'll talk about that in a little detail. But that's good. I mean, that is it's kind of an unusual thing. You don't see it in the other Gospels when they talk about the Garden of Gethsemane. So we'll come back to that. How about other first impressions or questions that arise?
Well, from the beginning, you know, that whole conspiracy thing came back to me because where is it? I got to find the line. Okay. So Judas got a band of soldiers, and I'm reading that. So is it a band of soldiers and guards from the chief priests? Because why would the chief priests have soldiers? So if soldiers were present, were those the Roman soldiers? Because I can understand the chief priests having guards and, you know, other people around them. So are we talking two separate things now? Like the soldiers and the guards from two different places?
Good questions. We'll, as we come back to look at the details, we'll go through that too. Those are good questions. Any other thoughts or questions?
Just a thought that when you think someone is coming after you and Jesus knew exactly what was going to happen to him. But for me, he showed absolutely no resistance at all. And not only did he not show resistance, he wanted to make sure that he protected the disciples from being implicated in any way.
Oh, one more thing I wanted to say, that, you know, all the gospels write this differently about some people say it's Peter who cut, this one says it's Peter who cut the slave's ear, and the other one that says somebody else. But this, I never noticed the name of the slave before. This is the first time I've noticed the name. And I know I've read this passage, but I guess I didn't pay any attention. Malchus, but I never remembered us speaking of it, people talking about it, being a workshop that they talked about his name. This is the first time I'm focusing on that John mentions this slave's name, slave by name.
Right. And that was going to be my next comment too, because I don't believe his name is mentioned in the other gospels. But then I thought, does John want to really personalize this relationship between what happened with the violence part of this and cutting off the ear and Jesus saying, no, Peter, that's not how we do it, you know, kind of thing. So I found that interesting too, that John is the only one who mentions the slave's name.
And I have one other comment about that. Jesus didn't do anything to heal that slave. I guess that's something that I know he told Peter to put his sword away, but there was nothing done to heal, to fix the slave's ear.
I look at the transition to the role of Judas that when Jesus had told them at the Last Supper, and now it's manifesting, and we transition to Judas's role in kind of getting that plan or the passion beginning. That's the way I look at it. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, good. Those are all really good points, and there's reasons why you're asking this question. So let's
Father
go,
Rich, I'm sorry. I just have one more question because I was thinking about what Michael said about the passion. Exactly, when does the passion start? And I know it's the suffering, but is this all part of, is mental suffering included in the passion? I don't know.
really
When does the passion start?
passion begins with the Garden of Gethsemane, but you know, it could even be at the Last Supper, where you know the tension is, you know, first brewing. But certainly by the time you're in the Garden of Gethsemane, when we talk about the Passion of Christ, you're at the Passion, at least by the Garden of Gethsemane. So we're definitely in the Passion now with chapter 18. So let's look at a few things. You know, so they get up from the table. Now, if you remember we talked about back, if you skipped all the way back to, I think it was chapter 12 or something, when Jesus says, okay, now let us get up and go. and then there's 4 chapters of further talking. And remember, he said that's what scholars think was added, you know, as an edit to the first draft. So because they think what would have happened is he said, let us get up and go. And then you would have come to this line. So when he had said this, they went out, you know, they got up and went out. So they think that the discourses that we've just been spending several weeks on was later added to the gospel as it was being written. So Jesus goes across from the Kidron Valley, and if you know the geography there, the Kidron Valley, that's why they think he was in the northwest quadrant of Old Jerusalem, and he would have come out, and from that place would have crossed the Kidron Valley and entered then the Garden of Gethsemane. I'm sorry, I should have thought ahead of time to get you a map so you could see where they're going. Maybe we'll do that next time. Now they're in the garden. Notice that John does not name it Gethsemane. He just calls it a garden. And then the first thing that you did pick up on, which is an interesting question, a band of soldiers and guards from the chief priests and the Pharisees. Generally, soldiers would have been a reference to Roman soldiers, whereas guards would have been a reference to the temple guards. In the other Gospels, they talk about the temple guards. They don't talk about the soldiers until he is officially turned over to Pilate, you know, and then Pilate takes care of the rest of the story. So the thought is that there may have been Roman soldiers involved from the beginning, and that somehow the chief priests and Pharisees had convinced, you know, some leader of soldiers to accompany them in this, you know, because they suspected maybe there would be trouble. And so they wanted the Roman soldiers, who ultimately would have had the authority to do something about it. So it's like the difference between a security guard and a police officer, right? So if you're down at the Basilica, you know they have security guards there. But if the rector of the Basilica, you know, knew he was going to confront some people, he might not only have taken his security guards, he might have called Baltimore City Police and asked them to accompany him. It's sort of that idea that there are Roman soldiers and temple guards that are there, at least in John's version, and it kind of makes sense. So then one of the things that's really important, Jesus knowing everything that was going to happen to him. Is that said in the other Gospels?
I can't remember.
No, it's not. It's
But I don't
only
think
in
so.
John's Gospel.
Right.
Throughout the Gospel, Jesus always knows what he's going to do. Okay, whereas in the first 3, it's not clear that Jesus knows what's going to happen. What do you notice anything? There's a huge event that is in this scene that is recorded in all 3 of the first Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, that is not recorded here, and also might explain the Jesus knowing everything that was going to happen to him. What do the first 3 Gospels say what happened in the garden?
Nothing about him praying. Nothing about the sweat and drops of blood. None of that. He goes right in the garden and gets arrested.
Exactly.
Yeah, nothing
Now,
about that.
why do you think John might not have included that?
I don't know. Maybe people already know, you know, what happened in that point, and he didn't want to drag it and go through it, you know. I don't know.
And look at the highlighted part, knowing everything that was going to happen to him.
I jump right back to his divinity. He knew, because of God revealing it to him, being God, he already knew what was going to happen. But rather than focus on the human portion that he went through, he rather focused on the divine part of Jesus, knowing everything was going to happen. So we don't even have to talk about the other part.
Exactly, exactly. So in John's view, that whole scene of Jesus struggling in prayer and asking the Father for the cup to pass from him, but thy will be done, and his, sweating as in drops of blood, that for John is kind of doesn't fit in with a Jesus who is God and knows everything that's going to happen. And that's exactly right. John, throughout this passion, pay attention, Jesus is in complete control throughout the passion as narrated by John. That is not the case. That is not how Matthew, Mark, and Luke tell the story. So this Sunday, or this weekend, when you're in church you'll hear the passion according to Matthew. Try to remember that and show up on Good Friday when we read this passion according to John. So every year you get 2 different passion versions, one from the first 3 Gospels and always from the Gospel of John. And you'll see that in the Gospel of John, Jesus is in complete control. So much so that, John says he knows everything that's going to happen. And when he says, "Who are you looking for?" and they say, "Jesus the Nazarene," he says, "I am."
So as Esther was saying, then John wants to show his divinity, whereas the others want to show his humanity. If they're showing of that, then Jesus is more like us. He's got to go through this, but he's not showing. He's a little afraid, but he's going to do it. That's his humanity side of things, and I think that's what the 3 Gospels portray.
Exactly. So it's not saying that those other things didn't happen, but John wants to emphasize the divinity part of Jesus going through this passion, as opposed to the human part of Jesus going through this passion. And again, that's borne out right now by these answers: I am, I am, I am. So Dee, you asked, did the soldiers pick up on this? How did he say it? So we've talked about this a few times. When you see "I am," how translating it into English doesn't quite work as well for us as if you were reading the original Greek. So because, if you say, we're looking for Jesus, I'm looking for Dolores Hawthorne, and Dee says, "I am," you kind of would scratch your head, right? Because that's not how you answer that question. But in Greek, so in English, they want to say "I am." Why do the English translators want to say "I am"? What's the significance of "I am"?
Isn't that how God referred to himself at
Yes.
the burning bush?
Yes, that's the name of God. I am who am. So clear, the interpreters of this gospel believe that Jesus is speaking in a way to invoke the name of God. In Greek, it would have been a much better play on words. So in Greek, the name of God is ego eimi, which can mean I am, right? But in Greek, ego eimi can also mean it is I. Okay, so ego meaning I, eimi, am, or it is, it's the verb for being, right? So in Greek, when Jesus answers, it makes sense, right? We're looking for Jesus of Nazareth. And he says, it is I, right? That works. But why don't we translate it as it is I? Because in English, to say it is I loses the meaning of I am as the name of God. In Greek, it's the same two words, ego, eimi. So how do we know that Jesus is saying I am? How do we know that he's saying the name of God and not just, yep, it's me? What tells you that something is up here?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe because
You
he,
said it before, Dee.
It's all caps.
Maybe because he knew that the hour was approaching and he felt comfortable in exposing his divinity at that
Well,
point.
we could say that, but how do you know from the text? So, in the original Greek, here, I'll show you the original Greek. Wait a minute.
see, y'all, I gotta learn how to do that when he goes up. He goes up. The original Greek.
Okay, so in the original Greek, we're looking at verse 5, right? They answered him, and Jesus said, I am, and Judas, his betrayer, was also. Okay, so if you look now at this is verse 5, if you could see on your right-hand side, right? See where I'm pointing? That's verse 5. Do you see anything that about the way the lettering is that catches your mind, that it's all in caps?
No,
Yeah,
not at all.
yeah,
Not at all.
it is all, it's
The
all
only
in
thing
caps.
it's in caps is the name of Jesus, Yezun Ton Nazarean.
And this is where he's saying I am right here, right? A-U,
Ego eimi, right there,
right there.
where he's saying I am. Okay,
And that's not in caps.
not in all caps. And there's a good chance that even in the original manuscripts, it was all caps. They didn't write in small
Yeah.
letters yet. So everything was in caps. And
Right, how would they know that he is saying that he's
Right.
God in
So-
this text?
So what gives you the clue that he's God? What happens?
When the men fall to the ground, that's
There you go. Why do you think they fall to the ground?
because they recognize that.
Yeah, they're overwhelmed by the fact that God is before them. So when
I'm sorry, something is, I can't hear. I mean, there was a little noise in the background. Can you repeat that, please?
So we know that John is telling us that Jesus is saying something about his divinity, because by saying ego eimi, and the response is they fall to the ground. Why would they fall to the ground? Well, they would fall to the ground because they're overwhelmed, because they're in the presence of God. So that's how the scholars are pretty sure when John writes ego eimi in Greek, he is invoking the name of God. And so the only way we can make that work in English is to say, I am, because when we translate the name of God into English, it is I am who am. Whereas when you translate it into Greek, it's ego eimi. So that's why we know that when Jesus responds ego eimi, he's invoking the name of God. Now it's possible we don't know exactly what words Jesus said, because it's possible they were speaking Aramaic. He could have been speaking Greek at this point, because if he's in the presence of Roman soldiers, why would he speak Greek to the Roman soldiers?
So they could understand.
Yeah, most people don't realize that in this part of the world, even the Romans spoke Greek. mean, they would have known Latin as well, but they would have spoken Greek in this part of the world. So even when we get to the part where Jesus is speaking to Pilate, you know, if you ever watched Mel Gibson's Passion of the Christ, he has Jesus speaking to Pilate in Latin. Highly unlikely. It's unlikely that Jesus knew very much Latin. He probably would have known phrases here and there. Very likely that he knew Greek. And it's very likely that Pilate knew Greek. And my guess is, as a historical matter, it's much more likely that Jesus and Pilate spoke to each other in Greek, not in Latin or not in Aramaic. So it is possible in this scene, since there are Roman soldiers present, that he actually did say this in Greek, ego eimi. But we can't be sure. But anyway, we know he's invoking the name of God because of their reaction. The only reason they would have fallen to the ground is because now they are overwhelmed by being in the presence of God, because Jesus has just invoked the name of God. Does that make sense?
I have a strange question. It's probably strange.
No question
I
is
can't
strange.
picture you realizing that he's God, and then you fall to the ground, and then he asks you another question, and they answer. I mean, it just seems so. I mean, if you were so overwhelmed, are they still on the ground? Did they get back up?
Yeah,
It's strange.
you know, it is. I mean, it's, you know, Jesus could be what's the word? You know, like not poking fun at them, but agitating them. You know, he says, "I am." They fall to the ground, and he says, "So who the hell are you looking for?" You know, and they go, "Well, we're looking for Jesus of Nazareth." "I am." You know, like, what's your problem? So, and he kind of does say that, right? "I told you I am. So if you're looking for me, let these men go." So there is perhaps a level that Jesus is provoking these guys. You know, he's agitating them. But there's little doubt, you know, sort of from a scholarly point of view, that these soldiers know that Jesus has just invoked the name of God, and they're overwhelmed by that. That's why they fall. Does that happen in any of the other gospels?
Not that I can remember.
No.
Doesn't happen in any of the other gospels. Again, why? Because John is emphasizing the divinity of Jesus, and that's why this whole scene is Jesus is God in this scene.
Right.
And the other gospel writers are more emphasizing his humanity.
You know, the other thing about that line too that hit me, it says they turned away and fell to the ground. It's almost like, I can't look at the face of God. You know how we hear, you know, the stories, you know, his glory is so magnificent that you can't look at God. And it almost seems like that. It's almost like the Holy Spirit overcoming. And then I thought too, were some of these people predisposed already with what they heard about Jesus to come to believe that he was truly the Son of God? Because you know how we talk about different parts of the scripture says, you know, how hearts were hardened, and you know, people would hear the word and not respond to it in any way. So I'm wondering if these people had already heard about Jesus, were predisposed to the possibility of belief, and when this happened, they were so overwhelmed that they recognized that this truly was the Son of God.
Oh, that was so profound. I mean, that was just, Esther, you put that so great. You know,
Oh,
they turned around. Oh, yeah, that was
Yep.
just awesome.
Yeah,
I the Spirit.
you know, it's interesting. It's probably both and. So the temple guards, who would have known more about their Jewish heritage and the name of God being "I am," that would make sense for them. But the Roman guards, the Roman soldiers, probably would not have known that the name of God was "I am." But they fall down as well. So there has to be something about how Jesus said it and what happened by saying it. You know what I mean? Just by Jesus saying, I am, there had to have been some sort of power revealed to them, you know, something of God revealed to them, which caused them to, and you're absolutely right, turning away, you know, you don't look on the face of God and live, right? So you turn away from the face of God. And then you fall to the ground because you're overwhelmed by the presence of God. So yeah, I mean, it's what's happening is very powerful. We just don't know exactly how and why it's all happening, but clearly these folks are seeing something about Jesus that is indicating he is divine.
Well, what makes you think that everybody fell? I mean,
No, he's talking
the
to,
guards too?
well,
You
he's
said it is
talking,
like everybody fell. You think everybody fell? And wait,
So-
I'm to Esther's point where the people who knew.
he said to them,
Uh-huh,
right? So
uh-huh.
we were just told that he's in the presence of the soldiers and the guards. Okay, so them is a reference to the soldiers and the guards.
So everybody fell when he said that.
So right, that's how I would read it, that both the soldiers and the guards fell to the ground.
It had to be something then, because I can understand that the chief priest fell, but
Well, the chief priests aren't there. Remember, they were sent from the chief
oh
priest.
yeah, okay, the soldiers and the
Okay.
guards. Okay,
Yeah, well, right now we just have soldiers and guards there.
I just have a problem with the soldiers, but
Going to be taken. He's going to be taken to the chief priest.
yeah,
But right now it's just the soldiers and the guards. Okay.
okay.
And then finally, just to the Simon Peter, right? He does, as you've heard in the other gospels, he cuts off the ear. This is all, there's only, I think it's Matthew who tells us it was his right ear, the others don't. So John is consistent with at least one of the other gospels who say it's his right ear. And you're absolutely right, no other gospel names him. Only John names him. And then put your sword away. That's consistent with the other gospels. Now, this is not in the other gospels. Shall I not drink the cup that the Father gave me? But how is the drinking of the cup associated with the story in the garden?
Okay, so that's what Jesus is doing in the garden, you know. That's reminding.
What do the other gospel writers say about the cup?
That
Well, that's the conversation Jesus had with God. You know, not my will, but your will, that he didn't want to drink from the cup,
What?
but not my will,
Yeah,
and Jesus asked God to take the cup
away. Yeah.
away from him.
exactly. Okay, so you see how John is playing with it now. John isn't going to include Jesus asking God to take the cup away because that's too much human, right? If Jesus were divine, why would he be asking God to take the cup away? So what John does is he keeps the cup in the garden, right? But Jesus says, shall I not drink the cup that the Father gave me? So he turns it around and has the cup, Jesus intending to drink it all along.
I had to smile at that line because maybe that's the little human part that John is showing. It almost sounds like Jesus is a little bit annoyed. Now, okay, this is why now you're telling me I shouldn't drink from the cup that the Father gave me? Come on already. That's
Right,
how I
he's
kind of
definitely
hear that line.
reprimanding them, right?
Yeah.
But he's not even, but also he just tells him to put his sword away when the other gospel tells us that he also heals the guy's ear.
Right, he doesn't do that. And the other one says, you know, he who lives by the sword shall die by the sword.
Sword, right.
He doesn't say that here. But I think clearly, so the rationale, I mean, you get the impression in the first three gospels, the reason Jesus is upset that Peter cuts the ear off is because it's somehow violent, and Jesus does not want any violence going on, right? Why you show up here with clubs and, you know, torches as though you're coming to arrest you know, a thief, what do you call it, a brigand or something like that, right? But you don't get any of that in this version. So Jesus is annoyed at Peter, not because he's being violent, but because his actions seem to want to interfere with Jesus drinking from the cup the Father gave him. And Jesus saying, look, put it away. There's no point in you trying to stop this from happening. We have begun the passion. I am starting to drink from that cup. Just let it go. Okay, so that's the scene in the garden for John. Very, very different from the scene of the first three gospel writers. And again, what I would encourage you to do is this Sunday, when we're listening to the Gospel of Matthew, listen how Matthew describes the scene in Gethsemane as opposed to how John does it. Let's finish up.
So Father Rich, I have a question. So what is the cup signifying again? Is it signifying his suffering that's coming? I mean, I'm not clear about
Drinking
what
from the cup is really accepting the passion and death.
Okay.
That you know, he is going to undertake.
Okay, I got it.
You know, that also is carried over. We don't really appreciate that when we receive from the cup at communion. I mean, all of those implications are in there. Are you prepared to drink from the cup? The same cup that Jesus drank from. Because when you stand up there and you say that, you know, amen, and you drink from that cup, God help you. Because you don't know, you just agreed to accept whatever God sends your way.
Got it. Thank you.
That's powerful, Father. Thank you
Yes.
for saying that.
Yes.
Woo. Go deep.
Yeah, we pretty things up a lot, but back then they would have understood that drinking the cup of blood, of Christ's blood, you're buying into the whole passion. Jumping in with both feet, as they would say.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's finish up, Esther. We'll just finish the this kind of interim scene. Verse 12.
Okay, here we go. So the band of soldiers, the tribune, and the Jewish guards seized Jesus, bound him, and brought him to Annas first. He was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was high priest that year. It was Caiaphas who had counseled the Jews that it was better that one man should die rather than the people.
Okay, so this one it's a little odd. In the other three gospels, when they grab Jesus from the garden, they bring him over to they haul him before the Sanhedrin first. But in John's gospel, he's being brought to Annas first. And that's a little bit different. So just know that, you know, a lot of these things you're going to get, you know, as we do in other stories, kind of the basic elements are all there, but they might be a little mixed up in how they're told. And that's where we kind of have to accept that the memories are somewhat fuzzy, but we do know that, you know, Jesus is brought before the Jewish officials before he's brought to the Roman officials. Okay, so why do they bring him?
I have a question.
Mhm.
The last part of 14, it was better that one man should die rather than the people. So Caiaphas, I'm trying to remember, Caiaphas was condemning Jesus because he was blasphemous. He said he was the Son of God. And
No,
so
no,
he should die for that? Is that
this
what
is a
I'm?
reference to a scene earlier where where we're setting up the plot of Judas to betray Jesus.
Mhm.
So these are the Jewish officials, and they're kind of consulting one another about what do we do with this guy. Remember how
Mhm.
Nicodemus is part of it too?
Yeah,
And
Yeah.
he's kind of taking Jesus's part. And Caiaphas, who's the high priest, is saying, look, better, let's get this guy out of the scene here. Better that one man die than the whole people.
So
What was
why
he
would the
referring
people have
to?
died?
What would he be referring to? Why, what does he mean
Oh.
by it's better than one man to die?
I get it. The people follow him and they'll fall into damnation also.
Not
Yes.
so much. That's actually being a little bit too deep in the thinking. So this is very practical. This is very practical. If Jesus sticks around and there's trouble, who's going to die?
the people, the Jewish
The,
people,
The
the
Jews.
And
Jewish
who's going to kill them?
people, the
Romans.
Romans.
Oh,
Romans.
okay, gotcha.
Romans.
Okay,
Yeah.
so the fear is if this guy stirs up too much trouble, the Romans are going to come in and stamp us out
Right.
because they don't abide by trouble very well. So it's better than this one man should die than the people.
Okay, thank you.
But that now there is a huge irony in this, and that's where you get a little deeper. What's the irony?
It stops Jesus' movement entirely. They go back
Let's
to,
go a little bit more. Now, this is where you have to go back to our theology. It is better that one man should die rather than the people should die.
Oh, he died so that we all would have everlasting life.
We all would
There you
live.
go. Bingo. That is the
right,
We all could live.
irony of the comment. That no, it is better that this one man dies so that all the people may live.
wow. Yeah,
Gotcha.
Okay, so it's a very powerful
wow.
statement because of the irony associated with it. And that's why John brings it up again. You know,
Yes,
Caiaphas said this several chapters ago. But John reminds you that this is the guy who thinks if we get rid of this one man, that it's better for this one man to die rather than all the people dying. And really what's going to happen is this one man is going to die so that all the people may live.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's now go to the denials. Go ahead. So you can continue, Esther.
that's amazing. Got to process all of this. Whew.
Oh yeah, there's a lot in here.
Peter's first denial. Simon Peter and another disciple followed Jesus. Now the other disciple was known to the high priest, and he entered the courtyard of the high priest with Jesus. But Peter stood at the gate outside. So the other disciple, the acquaintance of the high priest, went out and spoke to the gatekeeper and brought Peter in. Then the maid who was the gatekeeper said to Peter, "You are not one of this man's disciples, are you?" He said, "I am not." Now the slaves and the guards were standing around a charcoal fire that they had made because it was cold and were warming themselves. Peter was also standing there keeping warm.
Okay, let's go there because John is, because John's a much better writer, so he's going to be flipping scenes on us that are things are happening simultaneously, where the first writers, they kind of go through the whole of Peter's denial all at once. We're going to get Peter's denial in pieces here. So what's happening here?
Well, my first question was another disciple.
So who is that other
Who
disciple?
is that? Right.
Yes.
Let's see
Who-
what our commentary says. So let's see, another disciple, the other disciple. If you just kind of had to make a guess right now, what might you think?
Um,
Well, Well,
His
I
brother Andrew.
Well, why wouldn't he have said Andrew? He's mentioned Andrew. He's called him by name before. Why is he referring to this other disciple without a name?
without a name.
Who else do we know is constantly referred to as a disciple but not given a name?
I'm gonna say Judas.
No, we know Judas's name. He gives it to
John.
Well,
John, the beloved disciple,
What?
right? The
Oh, the
disciple that
beloved
Jesus
disciple.
loved. Now
Amen.
let's see what the note says. Yeah, see, the disciples looked at one another at a loss to whom he meant. One of his disciples, the one whom Jesus loved, was reclining at Jesus's side. So that's the first time. So the suspicion is that this other disciple is, now you remember we've talked about it. I mean, there are actually debates over who the beloved disciple is. Most folks say that the beloved disciple is John, the evangelist, the person writing this gospel. Okay, but there are other theories about who the beloved disciple is. But they feel that because this is the only other disciple that's not named, that it's probably the same. It is the beloved disciple, whoever that might be.
really?
That's what the theory is, that this disciple. So what does it tell you about the other disciple?
It says he was known to the high priest.
Yeah, he knows some people, right? He's got some clout. He gets what does the clout get him?
Entry into the gate.
It gets him into the house of Annas, right?
Side.
And how about Peter? Does he come with him?
Not initially. He
Nope.
goes back
Not
and lets
initially,
in.
right? So the
Nope.
other disciple has to come, he has to kind of, talk to some folks and then come back and get Peter to bring him in, because Peter doesn't have the clout just to walk in. But this other disciple clearly does. Okay. And then the first question occurs. Now, again, remember, this is the difference between a denial and a betrayal, right? A denial is you just deny that you know him. So Peter is not betraying Jesus, he's just denying him. And then we're told that they're warming themselves around a fire, which we do hear about in the other gospels as well. Okay. All right. Let's keep going.
Inquiry before Annas. The high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and about his doctrine. Jesus answered him, I have spoken publicly to the world. I have always taught in a synagogue or in the temple area where all the Jews gather, and in secret I have said nothing. Why ask me? Ask those who heard me what I said to them. They know what I said. When he had said this, one of the temple guards standing there struck Jesus and said, Is this the way you answer the high priest? Jesus answered him, If I have spoken wrongly, testify to the wrong. But if I have spoken rightly, why do you strike me? Then Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest.
All right. Any impressions?
Hmm.
Does it sound familiar at least?
I don't remember. It could be me. That this is in the other gospels. This particular inquiry.
Okay, right. No, it's not. It's not before Annas. Okay, but it's before the Sanhedrin. So, what is similar to what the other gospels say? What that you know in the story?
Ask those who heard me what I said to them.
Oh, no.
The exchange is pretty consistent with the other gospels. It's just about who in front of whom it occurs. So in the other ones, you get, we heard you saying this, what did you say? Are you the Son of
Yeah.
God? Blah, 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 blah. You know, and
Exactly.
Jesus kind of won't answer them, right? And then they get angry at him, you know, he's in trouble with them because he won't cooperate with them. So the idea is that tension is still consistent. It's just like, well, did this happen in front of Annas, or did it happen in front of the Sanhedrin, which is the governing body? The Sanhedrin would have been, you know, several temple officials, not just the high priest.
And I don't remember Jesus being struck standing there.
That I'd have to go back and see if they, if anyone struck him while he was before the Sanhedrin.
Yeah, because this is
go
the
back there.
before the high priest. I can yeah.
Yeah, we'll go. I'll go back and check on that.
If it's not here, it's in the movies, I'll tell you that he did.
But anyway, as I said, even though the details might be a little different, you know, the basic story is still there. You know, that the four gospels are fairly consistent with
Yeah.
kind of the tension between Jesus and his detractors, his opponents. All right, let's go back to Peter.
Okay. Peter denies Jesus again.
Denies him again.
Now Simon Peter was standing there keeping warm, and they said to him, "You are not one of his disciples, are you?" He denied it and said, "I am not." One of the slaves of the high priest, a relative of the one whose ear Peter had cut off, said, "Didn't I see you in the garden with him?" Again, Peter denied it, and immediately the cock crowed.
Okay. So you see, John breaks this up into two scenes. In the other gospels, it's all, you know, it's all said all at once, you know. And are the characters the same who are questioning him? And they're asking the same questions? Yeah. Remember, they say you one of them says it's a maidservant, and she says,
Right.
You sound like them, you know, you have a Galilean accent.
Right. I thought there were two women, wasn't it? I thought in the other one.
Such a good little girl. And
Two names?
There's definitely a maid servant in the other ones. I don't know if there are
Right.
two of them. Now that could be here because one of the slaves, you know, a maid servant and one of the slaves could be the same thing.
But then there's a little girl too, somewhere.
One
of them, and maybe it's the third.
I don't know about, you know, kind of again the age, but again, the basic story is there. Peter denies him 3 times, and then the cock crows. How you get there, the details might be a little different. Okay, and again, to me, that just points out how gospels are written. Either different stories are getting passed on, so the writers have access to different facts, or they choose to emphasize certain facts and not emphasize others, or include some facts and not include others. So again, the gospel writing is a process. God isn't sitting there dictating to the evangelists. They're receiving these stories, and now they're crafting a story themselves. Okay, so maybe we should let's wait here. Let's stop here because we won't get too far into the trial.
Okay.
And it's probably good to do the whole scene with Pilate all in one step. So so that just gets us started. Anybody have any questions before we?
Not really a question, but I think that what I love so much about the way the Gospels were written, with all of the discrepancies and the errors, and well, I shouldn't say errors, but the differences in how they come about, lends more truth to the fact that Jesus lived, walked, existed, was on this earth, it is who he said he was. Because if they were trying, when I say they, the gospel writers were trying to convince people of Jesus' existence, I can almost hear the, now you make sure you get this down and you're, okay, we got to make sure this stuff stays here. Everybody's got to make sure we're on the same page. You know how when people are colluding to make sure they have the same version of the truth? Well, they didn't do that. They said, oh, wait, well, this is how we saw it. This is how you saw it. Okay. They were in collusion trying to make people believe that Jesus existed. And I think that's what I love when I read the different versions of the gospel writers and in the scripture, because it's messy. It's messy in places.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
me, I always see that it's that line from from St. Paul, that we're an earthen vessel so that the power of God can shine through us. You know God is at work because we're so broken. So it can't be just us, and that's why I agree with you. That's why I love scripture, because it's so human and yet God shines through it.
Mhm.
And to me, when you want to be a literalist and you want to be a fundamentalist and you want to basically say God wrote the scriptures, you remove all of that. And it seems to me that's Paul's point. The point is that God's word is coming through broken people. And that's how we know it's God's word, because we know broken people just could not produce this on their own. And so, I always love that line, we are earthen vessels so that the power of God can shine through us. If we were perfect as human beings, then how would we recognize God at work? The only way we can recognize that God is at work is because unbelievable things happen through unbelievably broken people.
What makes us believe?
Yeah, I mean, so I just think when I point all these things out, to me, what I'm trying to convince you is how human these
Yeah.
scriptures are, and yet how divine they are.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm not troubled at all when you come upon discrepancies, and there are mistakes. I mean, we know in the scriptures there are just things that are said that are just wrong, factually wrong. We know that, but that's not the point.
Right.
It again only highlights that human beings somehow are being used as vessels for God's message, and God can do that. God ain't worried about we're making mistakes here and there. That's not God said, don't trouble yourself with that stuff. Listen to the message. If you sit back, you're gonna hear my message shine through.
Essential truths, the essential truths of God.
All right, well, I think we take Holy Thursday off, correct?
Yep, we always took a little
Yeah, we
Thursday.
always do.
So we
Yeah.
will, let me just double check real fast my own calendar. We would resume on Thursday, April 13th.
Mhm. Yeah,
So in the meantime, what I would encourage you to do, well, first, I always encourage you to participate in the Triduum, which is Holy Thursday, Good Friday, and the Easter Vigil. Those are the three probably most powerful liturgies of the entire year. And if you have the time and ability, they are well worth your time and ability, your time and effort. So I would encourage you to participate, but even still, as we read the Passion this Sunday, which will be from the Gospel of Matthew, listen to it. And how does Matthew tell the story? And then if you come back on Good Friday and you listen to this story, you're going to hear it's the same story, but you're going to hear it told very differently. And And again, that's why we have 4 gospel writers. One person couldn't capture it all. You needed 4 different versions of it. So having said that, we will call it a day.